And as two exited a house about 100 yards away, they were asked to surrender. Murphy's best friend responded as he moved towards taking them prisoner. They shot and killed him. Murphy advanced alone on the house under direct fire. He killed 6, wounded 2 more, and amazingly, after what had happened to his friend just minutes ago, took 11 prisoners. Murphy's Silver Star Medal was for his actions in charging a German machine gun position where he killed 4 and wounded 3 more. He received a bronze leaf on his Silver Star when he crawled up a hill and directed fire against the Germans while under constant direct fire. His actions resulted in 15 killed enemy and 35 wounded. Less than 4 months after his 19th birthday, Murphy was given a battlefield promotion to second lieutenant, and he was wounded for the second time on October 26th when he captured 2 Germans before being shot through the hip by a sniper. His wound would keep him out of action until January. He was wounded in both legs in mid-January after rejoining his troops in fighting. On January 26th, he became the company commander of B Company, and on that day, as they were attacking the German positions, an M10 tank destroyer supporting the infantry was hit and set afire. While ordering the company to retreat to the wood line, he remained at the flaming M10, firing his M1 carbine and calling in fire on the German troops. The entire time, Murphy was in full view of the Germans, and they were pouring fire in his direction. Then he did the unimaginable. Murphy climbed up on top of the burning tank destroyer and, mounting the .50 caliber machine gun, he poured fire back at the German troops. The enemy sent a squad crawling up a ditch trying to get to him, but he saw them and cut them all down. He stood alone on a flaming open-top tank destroyer for an hour with German infantry and tanks advancing and pouring fire at him. He killed or wounded 50 of the attacking enemy. The Germans finally wounded him in the leg, but he remained on the tank unit until he ran out of ammunition. He then made his way back to his men and refused medical evacuation until he personally led them back to push the Germans back. For his incredible action, Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor. He was promoted to first lieutenant and moved off the line and into a regimental headquarters slot as a liaison officer. Post-war, Murphy suffered from what we now call PTSD. He spoke to the VA about it in an effort to ease the strain on returning Vietnam veterans. He spoke candidly about his own problems and called on the government to give increased consideration and to study the emotional impact of combat experiences and to extend health care benefits to war veterans. He also launched a 21-year career as a film star. From 1948 to 1969, he was known mainly for his westerns, but he later played himself in the autobiographical To Hell and Back. That film became the biggest hit in Universal's history at that time. Murphy was killed in a plane crash in Virginia in 1971 and was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His gravesite just across from the amphitheater is one of the most visited other than JFK's. Today we highlight the life and the service of Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier in the U.S. Army in World War II. Today we salute Audie Murphy, his sacrifices, and the millions of others, of course, who have sacrificed so much for not only our freedom, but in fighting for the freedom of others all around the world. More recently, Staff Sergeant Timothy S. Williams was awarded the Silver Star after sprinting 60 meters under fire through open terrain to rescue his team leader in Afghanistan after an AK-47 round shattered the Marine's femur and sent him tumbling into a canal full of water. Williams scooped him up, stabilized his leg, then carried the Marine 3 football fields to a medevac chopper. He took charge of the patrol and led forces 2 miles over mountainous terrain toward friendly forces, killing Taliban insurgents along the route. For his courage, he was awarded the Silver Star. Williams 38 years old, graduated from Hudson High School in Missouri in 1999 and was an all-time all-state wrestler, a 1,500-yard rusher, and won league titles for both the football and wrestling teams as its captain. He was awarded the Silver Star for saving his team leader's life while deployed in Afghanistan. As we told you, Staff Sergeant Jason Pennick had his femur shattered by enemy fire that knocked him into a canal full of water. Williams ran across 300 yards of open field through gunfire, performed first aid on Pennick, picked him up, and carried him back to the medical zone before returning to action. Quote, "No matter where I was, high school, the United States Navy, or in the Marines, this is always something I look to do. With good people around you, anything is possible." One of the speakers who recognized Williams during the presentation of the Silver Star was his football coach in high school. This is no surprise to me that Tim was able to accomplish these things. You want to know who a true hero is? It's not Peyton Manning or LeBron James, because those guys have nothing on Tim. I'm proud to say that I know a true hero. In addition to the Silver Star, Williams received the Purple Heart after he was injured by a roadside bomb while in Afghanistan. Along with Audie Murphy, today we salute Staff Sergeant Timothy S. Williams for his heroic actions on the battlefield in Afghanistan some 20 years ago. And every Friday morning, of course, we tell stories of service. If you have a veteran in mind, if one of your family members is gone and you would like to recognize his or her efforts as part of the greatest fighting force the world has ever known, we'd be happy to highlight them and tip our cap to you and your family for the sacrifices that you have given for our country so we can continue to live in the greatest country the world has ever known. Every Friday, just after 7:30. It's our weekly Salute to Service here on the Big Talker FM.
I'm a patriot, American through and through, and I'll fight for this land I love, from the sea, the ground, up from high above. I'm a patriot. It's tough at home, but they know the drill. We've been doing it for years. Goodbyes at the terminal gate, little faces washed with tears. Well, it's plain to see it's my family they pay a price to, and it shows. It's the fear in their eyes, it's my baby's cries, praying that I come back home. I'm a patriot, I bleed red, white, and blue. I'm a patriot, American through and through. And I'll fight for this land I love, from the sea, the ground, or from high above, 'cause I'm a patriot. Folks always ask me how it feels defending my country. I'm proud to fight for the stars and stripes, 'cause freedom isn't free. It's not will I live or will I die, but will I let my brothers down? Can I live with what I've seen and done? Will I even be around? It's hard to see and it's killing me, but the price I can't let show. It's a pain in my eyes, it's my alibis. I wonder if I come back home. I'm a patriot, I bleed red, white, and blue. I'm a patriot, American, tried and true. And I'll fight for this land I love, from the sea, the ground, or from high above, 'cause I'm a patriot. I bleed red, white, and blue. I'm a patriot.
Hey, Bill O'Reilly, and I'm here to tell you about a dramatic new book in my Killing series. It's called Killing the Mob. Now, the mob traces the brutal history of the fight against organized crime in America. From John Dillinger to Bonnie and Clyde, Al Capone to Bobby Kennedy. The real history of these iconic figures is more riveting than any fiction. So please read Killing the Mob, a great gift this Father's Day.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Here, Tom Goolsby on the Joe Catenacci Show.
People with common sense know that the entire theory of socialism is one big lie.
The Big Talker 106.7 FM.
What got me into the recovery business is a result of drug addiction with one of my sons. Anyone that has had a similar experience knows the pain involved and the many sleepless nights, the shame, the guilt, and the anger. After spending about a year and a half at a local halfway house, my son and I decided to see if we could offer help to those suffering from addiction. A few years later, Prodigal Recovery opened its doors. We chose a name based on the familiar parable in the book of Luke. Part of the parable says, "My son was dead and is now alive. My son was lost and is now found." My son was dead and he was revived. He was lost and he is now found. Prodigal Recovery is a 12-bed home located about a half-mile west of the Cape Fear Hospital right off of Wrightsville Avenue. It's a 7-bedroom home, large entertainment room with billiards and more, covered outdoor area, and a gym. We believe fun and entertainment are important, and so is structured living. We offer that as well. You can reach Prodigal Recovery at 338-3795 or visit prodigalrecovery.org.
Acoustic wave therapy at the Frank Institute is a revolutionary treatment for inflammation, issues of blood flow, and is a solution for the constant suffering of chronic pain. Through the localized transmission of sound waves, stem cells are stimulated to bring about restored blood flow, vascular regeneration, and the disbursement of pain receptors to affected areas. If you've been told that your issues could not be treated without surgery or prescription, give us a call. Non-invasive, non-surgical, and prescription-free. Acoustic wave therapy is only available at the Frank Institute. Call today, 910-679-8534, and ask about acoustic wave therapy.
It's getting to the point where I'm no fun anymore. I am sorry. Sometimes it hurts so badly I must cry out loud.
All right, as we move up into the top of the hour here on the Big Talker FM, our Chad Adams going to join us just after 8 o'clock, as he does every Friday morning. Looking forward to the conversation and the discussion surrounding curriculum in our schools, critical race theory, social emotional learning, as it was brought to our attention just the other day. This sort of practice, which is basically same as it ever was in a comparison to CRT, is social emotional learning, as one of the callers pointed out. It's all the same gobbledygook, basically thrown at the wall to see, what you're able to see through and what they can get away with moving forward in our schools. So this discussion going nowhere, and it's as evident from stories that you're starting to see all over the country. Folks have had enough. Enough is enough, and I think it's just a culmination of kind of an awakening over the past year by many as it relates to the broken government-run public school system. We saw folks getting heated in Virginia just the other day. In Fairfax County, we brought you the audio of that teacher. You had another woman who grew up as a young person under Mao in China, explaining the atrocities that occurred where, well, we don't even know how many millions of people that that authoritarian killed of his own people in China years ago. Then you have people up in New York getting into a headbutting incident where a school board member calls him an a-hole, and he jumps up there and wants to knock them out. We saw what played out here locally just the other day. The issue with this is, it has nothing, and it's a great thing to see, aside from the friction and, potential violence, which is, never needed. But the fact that people are engaged and, it took a year of being shut down, a year of being told that you're non-essential, a year of keeping your kids out of school to get people to wake up. But this story is not being covered nationally at all. You'll get a clip here and there, a 30-second video bite that they post, the news agencies do on social media. You have to go and look at local news outlets like we have here, WAY, WECT, what we do here. And when you do that across different parts of our country, you quickly find that a lot of the things that are reaching a boiling point here, whether it be, of course, the school board back and forth in regards to social emotional learning, critical race theory, well, these sorts of heated discussions are going on everywhere across the country, and they get little to no news coverage, of course, by the national outlets. Those outlets have their agenda, and they're moving full force ahead with trying to distract, divide, and keep your attention away from everyday Americans stepping up and, from what I see, calling a spade, particularly when we talk about this introduction of CRT and SEL, social emotional learning. Let's get the science teacher out there to discuss race relations with our elementary, middle, and high schoolers. That makes a lot of sense. Folks, also here in this area, as we've seen in other parts of our state and the country, as we talked with Pete Callender yesterday from Asheville, a lot of similar sorts of things are being discussed here locally as they are in the western part of the state. Asheville, kind of a liberal bastion in the west of North Carolina. Wilmington, Democrat majorities, and Bill Rivenbark voting for property tax increases. Here locally, we're hearing that, over 70 Wilmington police officers have walked off the job over the past year. We haven't heard any solid information to back that claim, but there were a few messages that I've received, unsourced, giving us those numbers. We know that in Asheville, as their police department indicated, since January of last year, 86 officers have walked off the job. So it's been a very interesting week filled with tons of news here locally. And we'll continue to keep our finger on the pulse, whether it be the school board, whether it be the county commission, whether it be the Wilmington City Council. But nationally, of course, this week we were told by to New York, Dr. Fauci, that the backlash he's been receiving over his response to the BS COVID-19 Chinese Communist virus, of course, the more and more we look into this and the more and more stories come out validating some of the things that President Trump had been saying, particularly in the early months of the pandemic before he got steamrolled by the media, by those who were choosing to live in fear. Well, there's an article out this morning at the Washington Post talking about how the CDC is getting ready to review a potential link between heart inflammation among young people and the Moderna vaccine. The CDC says it has identified 216 cases of heart inflammation after an initial dose of the Moderna vaccine, and another 573 cases after the second shot. Okay, so what's that? 789 cases altogether? More than 130 million people have been fully vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine. So you can do your math on that. But while you're doing your math on the vaccine, and of course we've expressed our hesitancy to jump on board with getting vaccinated, because I'm finding it hard to believe anything that the so-called experts have been telling us for the better part of the past year, as someone who always questions everything when it's presented by bureaucrats, elites, given their track record, it doesn't necessarily line up with what's in the best interests of the everyday people out there, people like you and me, everyday Americans. So just going based on the track record and what we've seen, of course, play out over the past year. I'd add, if you're going to do the math on all that in regards to the vaccines and people who are dealing with different side effects and potential, heart inflammation, whatever it is, do your own math when it comes to a generally healthy individual that has died or has been hospitalized from contracting COVID. Because remember, it's the science and the data that has been driving this whole thing. A 98, 99% recovery rate for a generally healthy individual who contracted COVID. It's not to say it hasn't wreaked havoc on families and has, killed people. But we've been limited in the access of information that we've been receiving over the past year, as you know, to give us a clear, big picture type of look at what we've all had to live through for the past 16 months. Yeah, I'd do the math on a generally healthy individual who has died or has been hospitalized from contracting COVID and get me those percentages. Oh, yeah, by the way, new study shows that the controversial drug, and I love it, controversial, drug hydroxychloroquine, touted by President Trump. Well, in fact, the new study shows that hydroxychloroquine mixed with zinc actually increased the survival rate of severely ill coronavirus patients. We've been told for the past year that if you believed in what President Trump was saying, well, you're a denier and you need to just go into your corner and stay quiet. Put a mask on. Well, the observational study from St. Barnabas Hospital found that the anti-malarial drug, hydroxychloroquine, along with zinc, could increase the coronavirus survival rate by as much as nearly 200% if distributed at higher doses to ventilated patients with a severe case of COVID. And several other studies that have not been published in the mainstream news media have also come to the same conclusion, that hydroxychloroquine can be effective in certain situations against the virus. A December study from the International Journal of Antimicrobial Agents shows that 84% fewer hospitalizations among patients treated with the drug. Another study conducted by Hackensack Medical Center in New Jersey found encouraging results in patients with mild symptoms who were treated with the drug. Yet what were we told over the past 14 months? President Trump is a lunatic and he has no idea what he's talking about. He's not a medical professional. Well, what do you know? Maybe he had some access to information that you did not have and that the media did not want to give you to provide you a 30,000-foot look at this situation and mess that we've all had to live through the last 15 months. You have to wonder why this information was kind of kept away from you. I have a few ideas as to why. Mostly have to do with the 2020 presidential election.
Keeping Leland informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
People millions of dollars, we'd rather pass that value on to you. Call 800-900-8000 and speak with one of our experts. We'll send you a free gold kit along with my latest #1 national best-selling book, The Great Devaluation. Call 800-900-8000. That's 800-900-8000. Get the best information, the best process, the best service, the best value. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Call 800-900-8000.
Outgoing Israeli intelligence chief Yossi Cohen is detailing Israel's successful theft of a batch of top-secret documents from the Iranian nuclear program.
Mr. Cohen said it took 2 years to plan the theft of the archive. The operation focused on a warehouse in Tehran. Mr. Cohen said it involved 20 agents who carried out a nighttime raid on the property. They had 7 hours, during which they had to crack more than 30 safes. Mr. Cohen talked of incredible excitement as he watched on a screen in a Tel Aviv command center as the agents showed in real time the documents they'd found. Hundreds of files and disks were later smuggled out of the country.
The BBC's Alan Johnston. Israel says the documents prove that Tehran lied repeatedly about its nuclear efforts. News and analysis at townhall.com. Ransomware, the topic of a hearing on Capitol Hill.
FBI Director Christopher Wray says the Bureau discourages ransomware payments to hacking groups, even as major companies in the past have participated in multi-million-dollar transactions aimed at getting their systems back online. Wray tells a House panel there are a number of reasons why the FBI frowns on such payments. For one, it may encourage additional cyber attacks, and two, it may not result in people getting their information back. Jason Walker reporting.
Law enforcement agencies across the country have experienced a wave of retirements and departures over the past 12 months. One study finds that the rate of retirements at some departments rose 45% compared with the previous year. Yet on Wall Street this hour, Dow futures are up 62 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Our friend Chad Adams joins us every Friday morning just after 8 o'clock as we recap and hit some of the news that we've been discussing over the past few days. We bring in Chad for his perspective, and we're going to cross many different spaces here this morning. A lot going on here locally, of course. Statewide, the legislative session continues within the North Carolina General Assembly. And then we've got Grandpa Joe, of course, across the pond. This week, he'll be attending the G7 summit, wondering if he's been preparing for it or has it been all Dr. Jill doing the homework, as we saw through the tweet that she sent out just the other day aboard Air Force One with notes stacked high, while, of course, Grandpa Joe was telling our military servicemen and women that he keeps forgetting he's the President of the United States. Chad, it's a pleasure, my friend. Good morning to you, sir.
You're just having fun, man.
Isn't it? It's so easy.
Intro. Yeah. I hear that intro, and I'm like, is that like an amalgamation of Joe's life? You know, you've got the Rocky and the fighting back, and there's Dean Martin, the classics. You know, loves the answer to everything, and then that hard rocking music. It's like Joe. It's you. It's the guy I've known for 20 years, 15 years.
60 seconds or less, so we're able to provide you my entire life story based on 3 songs. How about that? And one speech from Rocky Balboa.
But I tell you, in today's world, you know, the Rocky thought, it's interesting to juxtapose what you said and what's going on with that thought. And that short speech that he's given to his son in that movie, that great line where he's like, look, life isn't fair. Life is tough. And all your whining and bitching and moaning about things isn't going to make it better. It's how hard you get back up. You are responsible for your destiny. You're the one responsible for what comes next. And you know, the political left and many media want to act like whatever's wrong in your life is somebody else's fault. That if only we can find the right person to blame, then that's what matters. We have to find the right person to blame. If we just blame somebody else, then you never have to accept any responsibility for what happened.
Yeah, it's a crazy time where that sort of a thought that I grew up on, a thought that probably your parents instilled in you, is so far from what many are hearing these days. It's all about victimization and pointing the finger at somebody for not having something in our society, and then trying to place blame using historically corrupt sort of ways of thinking to present this idea to masses of people. And there's a good portion of our population that believes in a lot of this stuff that's being projected on them by those who want the influence and power over our lives.
And I read a good article that they posted earlier today about, the left wants you to believe they have some kind of mandate that the American public is left of center. They're not. We're not. We're a center-right country. We have been. We remain so. And the left usually does a good job of convincing folks that they're moderates. They're really not. And they've become more left. But here's the thing. The left is trying to push this really hyper-leftist agenda. They can in North Carolina because they're marginal. Our governor, if you look at what he's proposed, every single one of his proposals is about how can I spend more money. If only we spend enough money, we can. They see government spending of money as solving all problems, whether it's housing, whether it's the virus, whether it's education, whatever it is. The answer is always spend more of other people's money. And to get to the point that it's okay to spend other people's money, you have to declare class warfare and make certain people look bad. So successful people look bad. And everybody wants to be successful until they are, and then the left turns on them and wants to take their money. So we're in a situation now where everyone wants to give away stuff, but they don't have a mandate because most of America is trying to get back to normal. They're trying to get their kids back in school, trying to get their life and their careers back on track. They're trying to just pay the bills and figure out how to socialize with friends and move forward, as Rocky said. That's how winning is done. That's what most of America is looking at, even as these other folks on the left try to act like they have some kind of mandate they don't have.
Chad, to bring the conversation to the local level for a minute, we started the week off with a very contentious county commission meeting here in New Hanover in regards to the budget that's been laid out, which includes a 14% property tax increase for property owners here in New Hanover County. That also includes an 80% increase for the salaries of our county officials who sit on the 5-member board, among other things, which would also increase the local stipend for teachers to the highest level of any district in the state of North Carolina. With that said, I want to get your comments based on this remark made by our commission chair earlier this week.
I don't feel sorry for people who are living in million-dollar houses and are complaining about people like me trying to take care of everyone.
Chad?
I always find that kind of narcissism amazing. Look, I was a county commissioner. Never did I believe that I was the one solely responsible for taking care of the people. My job was to do what is required of government at the lowest possible expense and achieve the best possible results, right? It wasn't about, we want to be the number one giver of money to local teacher stipends. I would want that to be about outcomes. I would want to be able to brag that our county had the best outcomes, that we were improving our acumen, that we were improving, not just the financial bottom line of teachers, but the educational bottom line of our students. Bozeman didn't say anything about the achievement of students. Not one thing, just giving teachers more money as if that's the way you measure success. And it isn't. It never is. It should not be how much you can give away. And that's not making people, if you think about that mentality, it's giving of money is what's going to make people happy. That's absurd. And she's not responsible for taking care of people. That's the scary thing. Because if you're a political type and you think your job is to take care of people, no, your job is to make sure law enforcement protects people, but it's not to take care of people. You're not a nanny state. You don't own me, and you're not responsible for my happiness. She just in very tight format delineated what's wrong with politics today. She's not responsible for their happiness. People complaining, I don't feel sorry for people living in $1 million homes complaining. Well, maybe that home was worth $300,000 and increased in value. That's a good, solid investment. Is it your job to punish them because of that? So if you increase taxes by 14%, that's a serious chunk of change. And if you're in a situation where you're hopefully planned financially that you're fine, it's not that it's going to break the bank, but it makes life more challenging because what she's saying is those people, I to take more from them to give to the constituents I want to distribute their money to. And that's not what this, that's the class warfare argument that you're seeing now play out in D.C. It's what you're seeing the left when they get in power. It's always about pitting one group against another, rich against poor, black against white. These are the kind of things, they don't build America. What makes America wonderful and great is we really do have a really remarkable place. And nothing is illustrating what a remarkable country we have than to push back on this critical race theory. It's like America was asleep, and they woke up one day and realized this stuff was being shoved down the throats of our kids. And by the way, our State Board of Education in North Carolina adopted that. It is going to be forced into the curriculum. And so now parents are starting to fight back. And in multiple states like Tennessee, where they've said, no, you can't teach this critical race theory. We're going to teach that America's great. It's a wonderful country. But the left wants you to feel terrible about your country.
Tennessee has pushed back. The state of Florida, the state of Iowa, there are all sorts of conversations going on surrounding this social emotional learning, critical race theory. Again, as you said, this has been adopted by the State Board of Education. I want to get to that because I also have an audio clip in regards to a conversation that went on up in Fairfax County, Virginia this week at a school board meeting where a teacher stood up and spoke out. And again, I would point your attention to an article by Brett Jensen at WBT News out in Charlotte. They examined something of this sort going on at Ardrey Kell High School in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg system, and basically it points out all of the holes in this discussion. Teachers are uncomfortable with getting into a conversation on race relations. I mean, the math teacher in 6th grade is now going to lead the conversation on race relations in our country and in the classroom. I don't think so. And then when you have, of course, other PowerPoint presentations that are put out there in front of our kids, breaking barriers PowerPoint that was highlighted in the article. It highlights Sonia Sotomayor, Hillary Clinton. Well, it happens to somehow, some way leave out Mark Robinson, first black Republican lieutenant governor, Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman Supreme Court justice from President Reagan's term. I mean, it's just a complete imbalance. We talk about whitewashing history, Chad. I mean, it doesn't get much further than that when you pick and choose some of the things that you want to deliver to our kids.
Yeah, and the Mark Robinson thing is particularly insidious. The left, look, people of all sides of the political spectrum make kooky comments, all right? And some of them make comments that can be taken out of context. Some of them make comments that are just ill-informed. You look at AOC, Rashida Tlaib, they make comments. Ilan's made terrible comments lately with comparing, the United States to the Taliban. So these are the kind of things that happen all the time. But particularly insidious was Travis Fain from WRAL, the largest TV station in the state, that went through Mark Robinson's speech. Now, he wasn't at the state convention, but he got a copy of the video, and he excoriated and ripped apart. Now, remember, WRAL is the same Capital Broadcasting company that accused Mark Robinson of being a member of the KKK in a cartoon. That's the kind of editorializing. That is, and by the way, Travis Fain is the one who covers the state house. He's the one that covers the legislature for the largest television station in the state. And that's the kind of thing that just amazes me, is that's what passes as journalism today, not reporting the facts, but the editorializing of everything. And you have to take the reporter's bias as news. And that's an unfortunate thing. I'm glad so many Americans do dig in and find out what they believe. People, and one of a particular troll that goes after you, goes after me quite a bit, makes all sorts of asinine comments. And he uses this, and also, he attacks and pokes. He attacks the person, not always just the argument. And that's what a lot of it is for the left. It's ultimately attacking the person, not the argument.
Chad, just circling back here to this conversation in regards to the property tax increases and the $1 million homes, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I'm not sure the vast amounts of New Hanover County property tax owners, in fact, don't own properties that are worth over $1 million. And at the end of the day, if you do have a property worth over $1 million, you're probably okay, meaning financially sound, if there is a 14% property tax increase. Who does that impact the most when we talk about a 14% property tax increase? It's not the $1 million homeowners, is it?
No. I mean, Joe, in fact, what's even worse is what Bozeman is proposing. This is the irony of most Democrat policies at the local level, is when they do that, they think they're really going after the rich. But you know what? They're hitting every property owner. They're hitting every landlord. So vis-a-vis this, the people that at the bottom of the rungs, those property taxes apply to low-income houses. They apply to condos. If you're a landlord and you're renting to wait staff that are trying to get back on their feet, guess what? Their rent's going to go up. the rent is going to go up for everyone in that entire market in New Hanover County because the landlords have to, that cost gets passed through to the person who lives in that home that may have had a decent rent, but then 14% increase in your rent. So this is the kind of stuff that, again, Bozeman doesn't care that she's hitting low-income people the hardest. You're right. The folks on fixed incomes, they're going to hit the hardest. The people at the low end of the political spectrum, at the socioeconomic spectrum, they're going to get hit the hardest. That tax increase isn't just about the rich at all. You're right. They're not going to get fazed or hurt by it. But again, she's trying to act like it's only about the rich. No, you're hitting the middle class. You're hitting the poor the hardest, the worst, and they're going to have the toughest time dealing with it.
And then, for the instance, okay, well, we're going to raise teacher pay as a result of this increase. Well, how about the teachers? They're not all of a sudden millionaires based on this, increase in local money. So they're going to have to eventually, use the money they're going to get through the increase to offset their cost on their property tax when it goes up come January of 2021. And in the same breath, they're going to talk about the need for more affordable housing in our area. Yet all of their decisions go against everything they are, pushing forward as far as major initiatives that we need to, touch on in our county.
One of the most serious problems about this mentality of taking the money and spending it and thinking you're responsible is when you're a county commissioner or a legislator, when you increase taxes, you're taking money away from people who earn it, and you're pretending that your utilization of that money is better than the utilization of the money by the people who earned it. In other words, if I take it from you, what I'm spending it on is actually better than what you would have spent it on. And the problem, the additional problem of that is that's not a capital thing. That's a thing where if you have it, you're investing it, you're buying, you're putting it to work. That money's circulating. But when I take it away from you, that money is no longer productive. It's not a dollar that is being invested. It's a dollar that's being taken out of circulation and spent on a government cause. And it's a very different kind of situation. And it's not more productive. The money you take from people doesn't make that money in society from a capitalistic investment standpoint more valuable to society. It's removing it. So it's a boat anchor. That's why if you raise taxes enough, you will cripple society. That's a known thing. We saw that with Carver boats in Wilmington decades ago when the Democrats passed a luxury tax to hit the wealthy, and the wealthy just said, well, I'm not going to buy those big, expensive new boats. I'll buy a used, expensive big boat. And Carver boats and all the people who work there, go out of business. It's a horrible way of treating the poor. They never realized that their policies hit that way. And now we've got, but Joe, we've got $1 million lottery for the governor in vaccines, right?
Yeah, 4 North Carolinians, 4 lucky North Carolinians going to get $1 million for getting vaccinated.
That's right.
The 2 county commissioners who voted against the budget this week, a reminder, they made mention saying, hey, we have unprecedented amounts of money flowing into our county, whether it be through the hospital sale, the COVID relief money, sales tax money, all sorts of other things coming in that why are we placing this burden on the shoulder of our property tax owners when many of them are still dealing with the impacts of being told that they've been non-essential for the better part of the past year, struggling to, put together, a working salary and put food on the table. It's just not a very great time to be, talking about this. And in the meantime, up in the legislative session, you've got Republicans, and we'll see if these 8 Democrats, stick to their vote from earlier this week, voting to move forward with a reduction in the state income tax for individuals while also phasing out the corporate tax rate. How about that? Yep. Why did these 8 Democrats cross party lines to vote with Republicans this week?
We'll see. That would be, you'd be able to sustain that veto. This is good for North Carolina because we know when the tax cuts first started happening and the political left and Rob Schofield and all these other, erudite lefties were like, oh, if we do that, it's going to destroy. We're going to have deficits as far as the eye can see. And what happened was just the opposite. We ended up with surplus after surplus because the North Carolina economy exceeded the nation's economy as far as growth and recovery. So now we're in a situation, I don't know. We'll see if those Democrats can stick to their guns because Roy Cooper, our governor's reaction has always been to veto everything lately. And also our governor's never passed a teacher pay increase. He's vetoed every single teacher pay increase in the past 4 years. All he's wanted is Medicaid expansion, to expand a federal program to get those federal tax dollars as if those aren't tax dollars, as if that money isn't taken away from people who earn it. So I'd love to see the Democrats come together on that one. I also hope the legislature will challenge the critical race theory stuff, but we'll see. It would be neat if they would get together on that. Phil Berger's actually coming out of this looking pretty good, a very conservative, moderate conservative voice. It's been very methodical in the way he picks his battles.
And in fact, we will speak with Senator Berger on Tuesday of next week. Looking forward to that conversation. And Chad, before we wrap up, again, we touched on it just a bit in this conversation surrounding CRT, social emotional learning. And you have to really dig in because this conversation is going on pretty much, I would say, in every state of the union right now. Parents waking up to this, fact that their schools are teaching kids something that they may not necessarily be in favor of. Yet the national news coverage, of course, won't tell you that there are controversies and people butting heads pretty much at every local school district, Board of Education meeting in every state across the country. No national news on this, but even in the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, people are starting to wake up. Let's listen into this Fairfax County teacher who had some things to say to her Board of Education earlier this week.
Fairfax County public school teacher, and I'm going to give a message of encouragement to parents and teachers and students who are too afraid to come and speak forward. Parents, the longer that you wait and you don't hold your child's schools accountable gives these guys more time to dictate what's best for your child's physical, mental, and emotional health. Don't be afraid to speak out for your kids because they are voiceless and they rely on you. You should be afraid of them rooting for socialism by the time they get to middle school. Teachers, it may seem that our careers have come to a dead end, but I'm here to remind you we don't work for the school board. We work to mold the next generation of well-rounded American patriots. So don't give up because it is up to us. Students, you are on the front lines of these indoctrination camps. Challenge the staff when you're presented with a ludicrous statement, and do not allow anybody to tell you that you cannot accomplish anything because of your skin color or to hate yourself because of your skin color. Students, it is up to you to be the next generation of victims or victors. And finally, to the board, this isn't over, and your policies are just as...
And basically, they cut her microphone off because she was on a roll there, Chad. And I think she just basically summed it all up in about 60 seconds.
Well, she did more than that. It's an example that the left ultimately overplays its hand in a way that's unpredictable. We would have thought, all these, we would have thought Obamacare did it. We would have thought that, a lot of the other political correct stuff would have done it. We would have thought that 100 different things that the political left does or says. But when it hits your kids, that's when parents finally realize, wait a minute, I sent my kids to go to school. I didn't send them to be indoctrinated. Wait, it's starting to sink in that the K-12 government-run school system is an indoctrination camp. And it's not the teacher's fault. These school boards and the State Board of Education, and by the way, Catherine Truitt owns some of this because she hasn't really fought against it, and she actually helped mold part of the critical race theory that's being forced down our throats now. And I'm not being mean to or disrespectful to her, but she was there sitting there when that was voted on. Mark Robinson stood up against it, as did Dale Folwell and some others. But now the left owns that. The political left owns it. They won't go against it because of the entire BLM Antifa movement, because they have to keep the crazy loon left part of their base, happy in some way. So Democrats are in a very precarious position moving into the 2022 elections. And how far will they finally push back and realize parents don't want this? And once you awaken the sleeping giant that are the parents in America of all races, colors, creeds, backgrounds, that's when this is going to hit the fan in a very serious way for Democrats. They're out of touch, and they don't have a defense for this because the tidal wave, the tsunami of parents, when teachers are starting to speak up and you've got parents going to every school board meeting across this country, that's a serious problem because it's going to trickle all the way up to Congress and to President Biden. These are problems, in addition to the 100 other problems that Biden's created. But Democrats across the board are having our own governor. When's the media going to start asking our own governor how he feels about critical race theory? He's gotten a pass. He has gotten a solid pass from the media who won't even ask him about it. He's the COVID governor, but he doesn't seem to be the governor of any other issue in the state right now.
Chad Adams
but
with
you
us.
Could win $1 million.
$1 million and maybe a new car, Chad. I mean, who knows what will be given out next?
Unless you've had COVID, Joe. You're being discriminated against because you had COVID, so you're not eligible for the $1 million.
Well, I'm coming up. Next weekend will be my year survival party that we'll be throwing a year in surviving COVID. At a time then, last June, there's still a lot of uncertainty as far as the data, the science, what it was telling us, and yet here I am today, healthy as an ox, and hopefully for a long, long time. Chad, thanks so much for the time, as always, my friend.
Absolutely. At least you don't look like an ox. But anyway, have a good day, Joe.
I was blessed with a great metabolism. Got to thank my beautiful grandmother, Grandma Catenacci, at 93 years old, partying at the Jersey Shore this weekend, down on the boardwalk at Martell's Tiki Bar, place that my parents were at, I was at. Now, 93-year-old Grandma was down on the Jersey Shore this weekend. A couple of cocktails, and you should have heard the commentary I was getting from my cousin, who was filming most of the day, secretively, so my grandma didn't know. According to Grandma, she's never seen so much ass in her life at the boardwalk this weekend. 93-year-old Grandma Catenacci. You wonder where I get it from.
I am State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better place. Visit us online at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hey guys, what if I told you that your wedding day could be the happiest day of your life, even if it rained?
You sound like the weatherman.
Better, Jordan. I'm a jeweler with the most amazing guarantee in the diamond business. If you buy your diamond engagement ring from us at Perry's Emporium and it rains on your wedding day, your ring is absolutely free.
It's the Perry's Emporium Legendary Rainy Day Diamond Guarantee.
No other jeweler in Eastern North Carolina has a larger selection of loose diamonds, diamond engagement rings, and wedding bands than Perry's Emporium, all at the guaranteed lowest price. Perry's Emporium in beautiful Barclay Commons behind Henry's, and on the web at perrysemporium.com.
We'll see you when you get here.
Tune in on Friday mornings to hear The Construction Connection, a collaborative effort between Joe Catenacci with the Big Talker FM and Cameron Moore, the executive officer of the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association. You start the conversation and we bring you the answers as we take a regional, in-depth look at growth-related topics and issues centered around the residential and commercial development and building industry. The Construction Connection, Friday mornings on the Big Talker FM.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. World leaders from the Group of 7 industrialized nations are set to commit at their summit to share at least 1 billion coronavirus shots with struggling countries around the world. Half the doses coming from the U.S. and 100 million from the U.K. Vaccine sharing commitments from President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday set the stage for the G7 leaders meeting in England. Today, leaders will pivot from opening greetings and a family photo directly into a session on building back better from COVID-19. Closer to home, the state medical examiner's office report on the death of Andrew Brown Jr. confirms he was killed by a gunshot to the back of the head. The report lists Brown's cause of death as a homicide. The finding matches up with an independent report commissioned by Brown's family. However, the state's report and the independent report differ as to how many other gunshot wounds Brown suffered. The state's report saying Brown was shot just one other time in the arm. None of the deputies involved in Brown's death face criminal charges. 2 have since returned to work. 1 resigned. In Bladen County, the sheriff's office looking for 2 people accused of stealing lottery tickets. Warrants have been issued for 26-year-old Richard Williams and 21-year-old Doc McIver for felony larceny and conspiracy to commit larceny. The 2 were wanted for allegedly stealing lottery tickets from 2 convenience stores. If you know where they are, call the Bladen County Sheriff's Office. And state wildlife officials say there has been a rise in the number of snake, alligator, and bear sightings. North Carolina Wildlife says one of the reasons for that increase is that many of these wild animals who were born this spring are now starting to venture out. Bears have been spotted in downtown Wilmington and other residential areas, as have large alligators. Snake sightings are also becoming more common. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Friday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with the Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, today we are going to see more of the same warm and humid conditions stick around, and inland communities are going to jump back up into the upper 80s, low 90s this afternoon under partly to mostly sunny skies. And as we get into the second half of the day, we are going to have to watch out for scattered showers and even some isolated thunderstorms developing, but overall not expecting a washout this evening. Late tonight, though, a few showers stick around with temperatures falling into the low to middle 70s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
All right, we're 25 minutes in front of the hour, and as we do it twice a month on Fridays, our friend Cameron Moore with the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association joins the program to discuss the latest within the construction industry here locally, trends that we're seeing both statewide and nationally. And of course, not to toot our horn, but we do it a time or two here on this program just to, for emphasis that oftentimes is the case where we'll discuss a story and then a little later on in the day, all of a sudden a report will pop up on one of the local TV stations, or in fact, we'll be discussing a story that has national implications, and then, like 8 months later, the national news media will catch wind of something that we've been highlighting. Not that they are tuned into our program, but that it becomes, a headline news type of story, and we're like, well, where you been? We've been highlighting these types of issues with the experts who are in the business with their feet on the ground for 8 months. We were talking about lumber prices 8 months ago, and now it's all over the national news. Well, we thank in due part for that Cameron Moore, who has his finger on the pulse, of course, everything related to the construction industry with the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association. He's kind of getting back into the swing of things because, we know these sort of guys out here, they go on vacations and those big swanky resorts and all sorts of other things that they get to do with all the bells and whistles. But that's what you get for some hard work. And the fact that, when you get a year of being told that you're non-essential or you have to stay at home in your house buried inside with your teenage kids and your wife, eventually you have to break free. And that's exactly what Cameron did last week. Cameron Moore with us from the Cape Fear Homebuilders Association. Cam, it's a pleasure, my friend. I hope you got a little suntan. Not too bad.
I got a little tan, not too bad. I definitely have to use the sunscreen. No, I had a good trip, a good time away out of the country a little bit. It was as we discussed before I left, kind of a COVID-wrecked trip that we repurposed into something else, and so had a good time. We were in Costa Rica for a little bit, but I'm back in the saddle, back in the swing of things, and trying to dig out as fast as I can. So.
Costa Rica is a very popular destination for Americans, I've noticed over the years.
It is, and I noticed their housing as well. So I was working in some capacity while I was there. They have a different model, and it's interesting, actually, because we're going to talk a little bit about housing today, some affordable housing. And yesterday, I was on a AARP. They're a great member of our organization. We certainly want to support what they're doing. Because of the agent in place and a lot of the different things, they do as far as the members that they represent. But the conversation came up in the forum yesterday on the state perspective, storage containers and, using them for housing. And it was interesting because in Costa Rica, it is a big thing. And not only for residential uses, but also a lot of the commercial uses are using storage containers over there. So it was just one of those things, you go to, I don't know how many miles away I was from, but another country, another time zone, Central America, and you see some of the same conversations, I guess, happening as far as the use of a storage container. It was just intriguing to me, so to speak.
We got a little neighborhood here in Wilmington of this storage container type of park, the cargo district, as they call it. What's the fad with that? I mean, why has this become so popular?
I mean, I think they're steel box, so I mean, they're easy in some capacity to kind of retrofit. I mean, you basically take a cutting torch, cut the windows out. You can modify the door. They work really well. Obviously, they already have the roof over top of them, so to speak, and they're compartmentalized to essentially where you can move them and put them where you need to be. And I don't know relatively the price of a cargo container, what it is, but I would imagine it's certainly going to be less than a new construction as far as a regular house, particularly now with all of our lumber prices and material prices and everything going up. So I just think it's another unique way that businesses, whether it be residential, commercial, multifamily, we haven't seen it obviously that much in that sector, but particularly the commercial, as we mentioned, cargo district, have just adapted, trying something new and adapted.
In regards to affordable housing and what we call workforce housing, you, along with the Cape Fear Realtors, sent a letter to county and city officials this week that we'll get to in a moment. But I got to ask, surrounding the vote this week, we've got a $50 million bond that's being considered here in New Hanover County that may be up to the vote of the citizens next year in regards to affordable housing. I guess my question to you is, as a builder, as someone who's in the construction industry, when you hear words of tax increases and bonds that will go towards this, that, or the other, obviously it opens your eyes because it'll have a deep impact on what you do and the way you approach things. Just give us some of the thoughts on some of the news that you came back from. I mean, heck, you go on a vacation this week and now you're trying to work your tail off to pay it off, or, pay the rest of it,
right.
Move forward, and then you come in and, there's a tax increase on the
right. So
horizon.
before we left, the Cape Fear Realtors and the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association, we have been following the Workforce Housing Committee, 13-member committee, for quite some time. They've been meeting over the last year and a half, having discussions about affordable housing, workforce housing, and quite frankly, as I like to put it, I don't like to put names to these, so to speak, housing in general. We've talked about it, just housing. Let's have a conversation just about housing. And that's what we do on this show every time. But, before I left, there was a conversation that the subcommittee was meeting to discuss a lot of different recommendations from the committee. And two of those recommendations were a $50 million general obligation bond or a penny on the dollar property tax increase. And both of those were discussed this past Tuesday. I'm sorry, not this past Tuesday, last Tuesday. And then the commissioners in that joint meeting and the city council, my understanding, voted to essentially move forward with the $50 million general obligation bond as far as advancing that to the next level. And that doesn't mean that it's passed. It's a voter approved. The voters are going to have this in the 2022 election on the ballot, and they're going to have to make a decision. The community of Wilmington is going to have to make a decision. Where do they prioritize housing? But at the end of the day, from our industry standpoint, we're still waiting to kind of see. I know that a committee's been formed, a bond committee, as they want to call it, to kind of take a look, because even the $50 million, they still have to kind of prioritize where they're going to spend certain allocations of those monies. They do have a chart, $25 million or so is going to this, infrastructure improvements, other improvements, and dollars are going to other improvements and stuff. We'll see if that holds. Our board has not yet discussed it as far as support or not supporting, or basically just staying out of it. I do not think we'll stay out of it because it does obviously deal with housing. But we're still a little early in the stages as far as just kind of seeing where we're going to be at as far as an association on it. But it is certainly something that we have had our eyes on, and we're going to continue to monitor as it moves through the different stages.
And we've had this conversation on multiple occasions in that, there's this fine line from your vantage point, advocating for the construction industry and the best interests of your members and those involved with the industry. This fine line as to, where government gets involved in this, that, and the other within your industry. And basically that's a conversation that every industry has. But given that we live in the fastest growing area in our state and in many places across the country, government seems to be wanting to stick their hands in the pot on a number of different instances within your industry. So this is kind of a toe-to-toe type of thing that you're very busy on as far as communication goes, lobbying lawmakers, whether it be locally, statewide. You've got your national membership up in Washington, D.C. It keeps you busy, no doubt.
It does, and I think coming back to the question a little bit too, Joe, says look at it. Just floating a $50 million general obligation bond out there for the voters to approve or not to approve, is it going to fix the problem? And quite frankly, there is no fix to the problem as far as workforce housing and housing in general. We do this every day through the association. We wage the war every day. We try to pick away and win small battles. But the housing problem is a supply and demand problem. It is a market problem. And you're correct. Government can step in certain intervals, but we have to be very careful where they step in. And I'm not saying that to slight what they do. They certainly have mechanisms. And actually, where they can have a better mechanism to help us is the land use criteria. And, we touched on that in our letter. Our letter is, of support for a lot of the different recommendations. I mean, it's 4 pages long of different ideas and things that we supported as a joint, as both organizations supported. We look at the land use criteria here. We've talked about diversity, density, and vertical construction, height. Those 3 things is what we have honed on and really attacked over the last 2.5, 3 years. And some of the stuff we've looked at here as far as, and the city's doing this right now, they are looking at a big lump sum change for their UDO, their Unified Development Ordinance, which is all of their development regulations. The county we've touched on adopted in 2019, late 2019, 7 new districts. So the plate is being set, so to speak. The stage is being set. Both the city and the county, and I would argue that other areas outside of New Hanover County to have what's known as a Euclidean style of zoning. And what Euclidean style of zoning is that we put the industry over there, we put the commercial over here, we put the businesses over here, we put the residential over here, we put the multifamily over here, and you have to get in your car to get to everything. And so the conversation that needs to happen is not only that we surround ourselves about changing the pattern of land use and regulatory and basically land use policy reform efforts to deal with where we place housing in relationship with those different other zoning criteria as far as businesses and residential, commercial, multifamily. But we also need to think about the transportation nodes. It's one thing, and we use this model, we've seen it firsthand. Where has the growth gone over the last 10 years? It's gone to Leland. It's gone to Burgall. It's extended outside of this urban core because that's where the affordable housing was. Well, that's great. You got the mortgage for $1,200 and you can afford it, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, you're spending also on the other end, the kind of the catch-22, you're spending more money in gas because now you work in Wilmington, so you got to drive back and forth. So those conversations need to happen. But the land use criteria is where we could see the city and the county making some really more headway for us.
When we talk about some of the developments that are coming online, or some of these efforts to create more quote unquote housing that the everyday man and woman can afford, the cops, the firefighters, they're always brought up into this. Teachers, people like me.
Like me.
Yeah. We got another apartment complex that just got approved over on Carolina Beach Road, and then you've got folks here in the area that don't really, in my way of looking at it, these are many of the same people that say, hey, we need more affordable housing, and then they're on the other side, they're saying, well, here's another apartment complex going up. But isn't that an effort being made in the private sector to address a need by putting up more densely populated developments such as apartment complexes in our area?
It is. And that's the market demand. I have a zoning map in my office. And for your listeners, I know obviously we don't have anything that they can see, but for just a visualization purpose, think of New Hanover County and then go north as far as I-140 and look on both sides of that, north and south, and just kind of visualize that for a minute. All of that area, and I don't know how many acres it is, but it is thousands upon thousands of acres, is zoned currently R15 and R20. And what that means is that it is currently set for a minimum of a 15,000 square foot lot or a 20,000 square foot lot. So when we talk about development, if I'm coming in, technically a acre is 43,560, I can put 2.2, maybe 2.3 units per acre. Well, obviously I can't build half houses and I don't build quarter houses. So once we put the stormwater in, the infrastructure in, the roads, cut everything out, that's where I start to get to that 2 houses, per an acre count. That is the most inefficient, costly land use pattern that we could ever do. And quite frankly, I want no part of it. And so we are advocating for the county to take a look at, that area. We talk about, neighbors coming out against projects, NIMBYism. It happens. It's going to continue to happen. Elected officials are going to have to remain strong if they want to make headway onto this issue. But if we look at areas that are already that do not have essentially, that is raw land and do not have neighbors, so to speak, let's go ahead and work with the county, work with the development community to go in and proactively rezone those areas. It doesn't mean houses are going to be built tomorrow. You're not going to see 30,000 houses pop up tomorrow. There's still a lack of water and sewer out there in that area. But if we go ahead and proactively reshape and set the stage, so to speak, and put the template out there, then as developments come into that area, they will look for more by right projects, less regulatory controls as far as having to go through planning commission hearings and public hearings and all this. And also from the community standpoint, you know that as you move, as the community starts to move and growth starts to happen in those areas, that those areas are zoned already for R5, R7, higher density projects that could involve multifamily, townhouses, duplexes, triplexes, as well as single family and commercial. You kind of already know that going into it. And so that's the challenge that we're facing right now in New Hanover County, particularly in the northern section, is what are we going to do with all the thousands of acres of R15 and R20? If we were to develop under that zoning designation and put all of that area at R15, R20, it'd be the worst mistake this county ever made.
And that's, looking, 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future right now, which government doesn't do very well.
Well, and we stressed that in our comments. I would say that, the city, that's not really a comment aimed more for the city because they're going to see more infill development, obviously the city limit lines as far as the annexation rules and regulations. But the county understands that. They have heard what we have expressed to them about that. We have to continue to push them. We have to continue to push them over the next couple of years to get out in front of that. And, a lot of times what we see with ordinances and the problem with ordinances is where citizens get frustrated with development. Well, the frustration really should be more probably shaped toward the ordinance itself because we're building to what the ordinance requires us to do. And if you don't like what we're doing, then maybe it's not so much what we're doing, but what the ordinance is dictating that we do. Case in point, water flows downhill. Correct? That's the common statement, not in the world of development. We can alter water and make it go uphill very fast because we have to alter the landscape for stormwater devices sometimes, and it doesn't sometimes go with the natural hydrology of that site. And so, the challenge here with the land use is making sure that our ordinances stay up to date with the market conditions. In other words, they're either out in front of it or they're right there with us as we move as a development. If we get to the point where we are right now with 2 codes that are 30-something years old, well, I hate to tell your listeners, the challenges that we have today are because of those codes and the way we developed under those codes. There's been a lot of great projects, but a lot of the challenges are because we've got codes that are 30 years old. They're nowhere near where they need to be. So we're revising. We'll see some changes in that.
Cameron, we look across the way here from the top of the Murkinson building. You see this River Place project. You could talk about the Gateway project as you enter into the city of Wilmington on 3rd Street, the County Government Center, their project. What I'm getting at is these public-private partnerships that government continues to enter into at the utilization of tens of millions, in many cases, of taxpayer dollars being utilized to create a structure like we have right here with River Place along Water Street. When you get into this, interesting relationship and negotiation with government, it's kind of a fine line, right? Because as a taxpayer, you want to get the best investment possible for your money,
right?
And you see in some cases, in this instance here with River Place, $20+ million went to it. There were cost overruns. You had to keep going back to the well to bring more money out. To have $1 million to develop a little grassy area here on Front Street. And, for the taxpayer that lives in, Monkey Junction or, lives out towards the outer limits of the city, you say, well, why is my money being invested into this?
Sure.
Explain kind of the dynamic of a public-private partnership and what can be done, to help kind of smooth over the concerns that taxpayers have as far as using our money to the best way and possible.
Sure. I mean, and as you were kind of going through some thoughts that came to mind, I mean, you look at the theme community goodwill and trying to put projects in place that can enhance not only a certain area, but enhance the community for everybody. Yes, okay, you live in Monkey Junction or you live in Porter's Neck, you can still come down to the parks and utilize those. Those are services that your taxes pay for. And it is a fine line, Joe. You're exactly right. And it's a delicate line as far as when do we use taxpayer money and how much do we use. But as a high growth area that is not going to stop, I mean, you know, we're looking out your window. What do I see? I see also a river. And then we go just a little bit to the east and I see now a beach. And so those two areas have really, those two features, geographic features, have, you know, essentially grounded us to where more and more people want to move here every day. We touch on this all the time. Somebody right now is in a closing office here. It's 8:54. At 9 o'clock, they'll be open, but they'll be closing on a new house today. You know, the public-private partnership is all about investing capital back into. It's no different than really a business, and it's no different than a builder's business or any of our members' businesses. The cash that comes on the backside, the profit, you know, you have to reinvest that into your business to make it grow. And it's the same kind of model that the city and the counties are having to utilize in the sense that we've got to look at increased capital access, yield investment opportunities. But a public-private partnership is just that. The government comes in, and then the private sector comes in. They form a partnership. There's certain levels of basically money spends that come out of that, allocations. Sidbury Road project, this water and sewer that's going in, more the sewer project that's going in over there, is coming out of, you know, federal monies. And it's to the tune of, I think, about $7 million. But what that does is it opens up through that sewer line extension, it opens up areas for growth. And it starts to open up areas to where environmentally we would be developing R15, R20, and on septic systems. And so it's putting investment back in, but it also opens up different areas now that are available because we're putting in larger lines. And so you needed a 6-inch line just for that development. Well, you know, we could put in a 12-inch line and now we can serve more. So that's how those partnerships work. Roads is going to be the biggest challenge, particularly with the county. We've talked about this. Counties don't build roads. You know, they don't have the same mechanisms that are statutorily given to them that the cities have, and they'll let you know that as well. But, you know, that's going to be a question that we're going to really have to look into. You know, is that public-private partnerships with the county, DOT, and the development community to come in and look at building roads? The investment pattern that we've got to look at, though, has to change, mainly because the expense of these of infrastructure, water and sewer and roads, has gone up just as much as everything else. Just like everyone goes to the grocery store to grab groceries for the weekend, or to grab some kind of food for the weekend, maybe for a cookout, everybody has recognized over just the last year the amount of expense and the cost and how it's gone up. Well, it's the same. It's the same when we look at infrastructure right now.
Cameron Moore with us from the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association. Twice a month, we talk trends and other issues related to the construction industry, specifically surrounding our area. Of course, we take a look at what's going on statewide here in North Carolina and around the country. We talk about some of the hurdles that the industry is facing. Not really good numbers, Cameron, coming off of the monthly jobs report in May. In fact, the construction industry was highlighted specifically that you know, we're seeing some downward trends as relates to workforce and the ability to get people on the job, let alone get materials on the job site in a timely manner, given the detailed conversations that we've had over the better part of the last 8 months, talking about the inability to get windows or other sorts of materials, along with lumber. This does, and granted, you've enjoyed some flourishing years over the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years since coming out of the Great Recession, specifically, locally. Are we going to get it out of the woods anytime soon as it relates to some of this? Is there going to be an ease in the supply chain where, materials are starting to come in? And then when it does, I have a buddy that does, exterior work, and he's saying, man, well, all the materials starting to come in. Now I don't have enough guys to get on the job because we've been kind of backlogging everything in order to keep the pace and keep people busy. Now we're going to get hit, and every builder that I work for is going to be calling in saying, "Where's your guys on the job site?" Because we've been waiting for this long. There's another issue that's going to pop up here.
It is, and so we have a couple different challenges kind of taking shape. Obviously, we've touched on the material prices, the delays, whether it be lumber, and particularly anything that goes into the construction of a house right now. While I was away, I know that there was a fairly hefty increase on drywall. And I've also heard that paint had another increase as well. I think we're still going to see some increases, particularly on the material side instead of the lumber side, because those are still playing catch up. Lumber has been increasing since last September, actually August, if we really want to go back down to when it really started. I have heard a little bit of easing on lumber, but not to the point where, quite frankly, we're seeing it within the market, to the extent that I'm seeing builders, starting to crack a smile, at least when they see their lumber bill. But the other challenge, though, is that we need to make sure, as an industry, that we have a good understanding that the prices are never going to go back to where they were. Now that they've gone to the extent that they are, this is what we keep hearing from the economists, that we're not going to see. We may cut it back in half, so to speak, but we're not going back down to the levels of prices where they were before, essentially 2018, 2019. Coupling that now with the labor crisis, and I'm going to use the term crisis because now I see that becoming a crisis. After the recession in 2005 and really 2008, 9, and 10 for this area, and then we kind of got back on our feet in 2013 and 14. We lost a ton of labor because essentially there wasn't anything to build. And so either they got out of the industry for all sorts of different reasons, and they just haven't come back to this industry. Immigration reform, it's huge. A lot of our industry, particularly, went back across the border, so to speak. And when they did, but due to immigration reform, those policies changed it to where it created the entry requirements. It made them more restrictive. And so getting back across the border to and from U.S. and Mexico, as far as our Hispanic labor, it proved to be very challenging. And so we have to have immigration reform and some kind of detailed policy to where we can get labor that wants to come here to the States to work. Couple that now with this federal unemployment that I think ends in September after Labor Day.
North Carolina, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. And human nature will tell you that you will figure out, if you want to, how to game the system. And that's what's happening. I mean, let's just get right down to the facts of it. People are gaming the system right now because they're getting paid basically to stay at home. And that's unfortunate because that is the last thing we need to be doing right now. We need to be, you look at the service industry. We touched on it right before I left. They've got help wanted jobs everywhere. They're trying to hire left and right. I saw, actually, it was interesting going through the Atlanta airport. There was quite a few, an airport, a regional hub airport with international travel, all sorts of flights coming in and out of there. There was more businesses, restaurants in there that were closed than there were open because they didn't have labor to open up the restaurants.
Cameron Moore with us from the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association. Twice a month, we talk the construction industry locally, surrounding growth, development in our area, throughout the state and across the country. We'll continue the conversation right after this quick timeout here on the Big Talker FM.
Keeping Holden Beach informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
Dow futures up 96. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Tell me why Relief Factor is so successful in lowering or eliminating pain. I'm often asked that question. Pete and Seth Talbot, the father and son founders of Relief Factor, tell me they believe our bodies were designed to heal. The doctors who formulated Relief Factor selected the 4 best ingredients, 100% drug-free ingredients that each help your body deal with inflammation. Order the 3-week quick start now. Discount it to only $19.95 to see if it will work for you too. Call 800-500-8384. ReliefFactor.com.
Oh, whale! Guys, whale! Wow, whale. Oh, that's a big whale. Okay. Whale, whale, whale. Oh, no, whale!
The tides can turn quick on the water. Progressive's boat insurance has you covered. Get a quote today in as little as 3 minutes at Progressive.com.
Well, at least it wasn't a shark, am I right?
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
The dusty, rocky Martian surface and a Chinese rover and lander bearing small national flags were seen in photos released Friday that the rover took on the red planet.
The 4 pictures released by the China National Space Administration also show the upper stage of the Zhurong rover and the view from the rover before it rolled off its platform. China landed the Tianwen-1 spacecraft carrying the rover on Mars last month after it's been about 3 months orbiting the red planet. China is the second country to land and operate a spacecraft on Mars after the United States. The 6-wheeled rover is surveying an area known as Utopia Planitia, especially searching for signs of water or ice that could lend clues as to whether Mars ever sustained life. Bernie Bennett reporting.
Israel due to swear in a new government on Sunday, ending Prime Minister Netanyahu's record 12-year rule and a political crisis that inflicted 4 elections on the country in less than 2 years. News and analysis, townhall.com. In a nod to political correctness, or wokeness, if you will, there will be no freshmen at Texas Christian University this fall.
That's because the school is dropping the classification and replacing it with first-year student, all in an effort to be more gender inclusive. The school already has officially dropped the term, and the new moniker is in effect for any students taking fewer than 24 credit hours. However, the change is getting mixed reviews on campus. Similar changes have been made at several colleges and universities around the country, like Yale, Penn State, and the University of North Carolina. Ron DeRockster reporting.
A bipartisan group of senators working on an infrastructure deal with $579 billion in new spending. It's part of a package totaling $1 trillion. Once again on Wall Street this hour, stock futures positive territory. Dow futures now up 100 points. NASDAQ futures ahead 17. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
We're back here on the Big Talker FM as we roll into the final couple of segments of the broadcast week. Of course, you can find us all over the place these days as far as tuning into the program and the great broadcast schedule that we deliver to you on a daily basis, whether it be our local programs that you hear from 6 until 7 p.m. weeknights or our weekend programming that gets kicked off tomorrow just after 8 a.m. with our good friends Matt Ham and Kevin Adams with their latest edition of Wake Up Our Faith. Followed by the Len with Ben show, Ben Hawkins with Cross Country Mortgage, the Consumer Choice Radio program from 10 until 11 a.m. Saturdays, Lillian Beecroft, Awaken to Greatness at 11 a.m., Mark Benson with Blue Line Radio at high noon. Cameron Moore with us right now here on the Big Talker as part of our twice-a-month Construction Connection segment here on the Big Talker FM. And Cameron, moving into the break, discussing a lot of hot-button topics with some focus on this region as far as growth development goes, affordable housing. We've got this $50 million bond that will be pitched to the voters ahead of the November 2022 midterm elections. And in this area and across the rest of the country, particularly along the coastlines and in beautiful places and destinations where our environment is an attraction to so many. This is often another needle that you need to use to thread a fine line as far as the way things are built and the way you have to adapt and adjust to the regulations, the standards that are in place. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the environment and as we have highlighted, just because I lean maybe to the right of the political spectrum doesn't mean I don't want clean air or clean drinking water, despite what maybe the folks out there and the people in opposition to my viewpoints would label me as. I think the developers and the builders in our area and all across the country get kind of that bad connotation too, that all you want to do is destroy planet Earth so we can build more houses and you can make more money. You live in the community in which you work in, so it's not like you want to see the water poisoned because ultimately you drink the water, your kids drink the water, your pets drink the water, your extended family members and friends drink the water. So just kind of talk about that, interesting, space that you have to navigate through when we talk about environmental issues and all sorts of other things related to our quality of life here.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to trying to figure out where you can strike a balance. There's a lot of different organizations on a lot of different sides, so to speak, and everyone that goes into their respective corners. But if we can have good conversations, good communications, and quite frankly, just utilize some common sense approaches when it comes to the environment, typically we can strike a balance. One thing we're seeing now, and we kind of knew this was coming under the new administration, is that as of yesterday, they announced, the EPA and has announced, and the Department of the Army with the Corps of Engineers has announced their intent to revise the definition of waters of the United States. So basically WOTUS, as it's been termed now for many years. And really what it comes down to is navigable waters and the protection rule under navigable waters and that definition. That has always been a challenge in trying to find a common sense approach to the rulemaking process when it comes to man-made ditches or isolated ponds. Navigable waters would be, from me and you, Joe, let's just quickly look at it, not get into the weeds of interpretation. It means to be able to navigate it from A to B. Well, a pond is not a navigable water. Yes, you can put a canoe or a boat in there or something and you can navigate around, but navigable waters, in my sense, is something that has a inflow and an outflow, typically maybe dumps into the ocean, so to speak, at some point, has a discharge, so to speak. And so here we go again. The Trump administration came in, made a lot of different changes to the actual definition and went through the rulemaking process. Now we're seeing the new administration kind of peel the onion back, so to speak, and look at the overall rule. They've asked the Department of Justice to file a motion requesting basically to remand the rule. And so we just go back through the process. Obviously, we'll have some conversations with the National Association of Homebuilders. I know this is on their radar screen. Matter of fact, we got an alert from them yesterday on this. But it's a new administration trying to strike their balance. What we've got to figure out is how we strike a collective balance.
When we talk about government involvement, and we did that in the first couple of segments of our conversation, we get caught kind of in a rock and a hard place in that people want goods, they want to consume, they want to do so in a cheap, affordable manner. But oftentimes is the case because of the direction we've pushed our country into, manufacturing and other sorts of jobs that produce these great little gadgets that we're able to use on a daily basis. Are made in other parts of the world and in unfavorable conditions, we'll say, based on the type of labor laws or lack thereof in places like China, for instance. No one questions that because when they get their laptop for $99 and they can pay it off $20 a month for 6 months, they say, oh, it's affordable and it does what it needs to do. Who cares what's going on the other side of the world? Well, we can point out whether it be waterways or lumber, for instance. We've made an effort over the course of the last couple of decades to take a lot of this production away from our country. But then we don't connect the dots when there is a chink in the armor, chink in the supply line. You shut down the country for the better part of a year, and then you wonder why prices skyrocket. Well, it's because we're so dependent on other nations from around the world to deliver the goods in a cost-effective manner. I think there's just a bit of a disconnect there, I think, among the general public as far as how things get to your doorstep and the ways in which we've strayed away from this sort of production and manufacturing in our country. And you look at lumber. There are no lumber mills or any sort of lumber plants out there in the country. We, as you mentioned off the air, we've got beautiful forestry across the nation. You go up to Pigson National Forest in the mountains. We're not cutting down trees because it's protected. Right. But in turn, we're reliant now heavily on Canada for our lumber. You shut down the border and, lumber prices are going to skyrocket. I think there's just a bit of a disconnect amongst the public as far as how things end up, as you said, put together to build your house, or laptop turns up on the doorstep. It's just it is a global supply chain, and that's what it is. And we've made that effort over the last 40 years to make it like that. And now we're kind of bearing the cost of all this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from the construction industry, it is absolutely a global supply chain. And Joe, that actually kind of played out right here from a community standpoint. You look at Titan. I mean, it played out right here with Titan. They came. It was going to be a made here in Wilmington, so to speak, made in USA product. And community activism came out against that project and ultimately shuttered the project. And so it's the same thing. You look at something that's made in USA and, a product that you get, and, I feel kind of proud about that. But you typically are going to pay a little bit more for that product. I would say, and this is not a political statement upon either the Republicans or Democrats, but a large component of Trump's administration was to try to shift a lot of this conversation to get back into how do we get products made back into the USA. But again, we've been doing this for the last 100 years. This isn't just you can't just flip a light switch and everything all of a sudden just come back to made here within the country. And so the global supply chain has been disrupted. It's going to stay disrupted for a while. It has created a lot of havoc within our industry. We talk about lumber mills and the lack thereof of lumber mills, just in general, as far as operating within the states. A lot of those mills are now across the Canadian border, and it's due to a lot of different things: regulatory controls, labor controls. But if we're going to be dependent upon 2x4s and 2x6s and wood and trusses and everything to start the framing of a house, we've got to figure out where we get that wood from. And if we're going to still get it from Canada, and then, oh, by the way, before I left, the Commerce Department decided to raise tariffs, to look at tariffs another 18%. That doesn't really, that's an oxymoron. It's kind of like, why would we've got all these problems, but you're going to go ahead and raise the tariff percentage. Then this problem is just going to keep continuing to get worse and worse. I mean, I understand the purpose of having a global economy. I understand what it does for us. We, import, export type of goods. But we've got to figure out how can we start to look more at the home front to be able to manufacture goods and services. That's going to be a challenge, though, because to do that, it's going to cost more.
And Americans, for the most part, want things as cheap as possible for many good reasons. But with the understanding that you may see delays, you may end up seeing rises in the cost of what you're going to spend it on, because we're relying on somewhere on the other side of the world to get you what you need in a timely manner. So it's just
and there's a balance too. I mean, I just got back from Central America, and it really makes you appreciate when you get back on your own soil, so to speak, what we have here. Small, simple things as far as having clean water, being able to flush a toilet, having a toilet, and stuff like that. It makes you really appreciate that. So it's striking that balance. What is the consumer willing to pay for? You talked about the national forest. As a country, are we willing to go in and say we want all lumber production to come back to the states and go into our national forest and cut trees down? I think that debate would wage for the next 40 years before the first tree would ever get cut down.
Right.
And it would end up in lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. We are where we are. It is what it is, so to speak, as we like to use kind of the terminology sometimes at the HBA. We've got to continue to press forward. We've got a lot of supply, a lot of demand right now. We've got to figure out how to put some supply on the ground here locally. But we have some serious challenges, particularly now within our industry.
Cameron Moore, once again, with the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association, giving us a twice-a-month update on trends and issues related to the construction industry here across our region, the state, and throughout the nation. And now speaking globally here today, as far as how reliant we are on certain materials and other sorts of things that impact your cost and way of life right here in southeastern North Carolina. Cameron, as we wrap up our conversation for the day, as we look into the next couple of weeks before your next appearance later on this month, is there anything out there that might be on the docket, whether it be through the county, the city, regionally, that people should keep an eye on?
I mean, I know the city of Wilmington is getting very close to having the full UDO go in front of the Planning Commission and kind of start that process. We've started we've got the alerts out on that as well. Obviously from the stuff we talked about here as far as the affordable housing issue, the $50 million bond, we're going to be watching that very closely. I think in August, the bond subcommittee is supposed to kind of get formed and then supposed to start meeting to kind of talk about what that's going to look like. You touched on while I was gone, the budget here in New Hanover County, the tax increase as it's been labeled, and then, of course, some of the other things that were in that budget. You've got that coupled with essentially what could be a bond and also another tax increase dealing with transportation, voter approved. It will have to be voter approved. So, there's a lot of things, not just here in the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about within the next 2 years that this community is going to have to really weigh in on. Is the community willing to pass a $50 million bond for housing? Do they care?
Why do I feel like I'm living in New Jersey again? Wait a minute. We're passing and voting on all sorts of increased spending mechanisms to address this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, what's the end result? I think a bunch of government gobbledygook that ends up hurting the cost of living and the quality of life in our area. Just saying. Maybe I've come from a place or two that has gone down this pathway before.
Yeah, I think what we're going to really...
Wait, so you're saying $50 million affordable housing bond, and then there's another transportation bond that may be on the horizon,
that
too?
That has been the conversation. I need to do some follow-up on this, but that has been the conversation. But I do know that the $50 million bond has definitely been voted to be to put resolutions of support out there in front of both the city and
a transportation bond.
Yeah, I mean, you look at
what would that be related to public transportation?
Wave transit, and trying to figure out some different mechanisms. But I do know that Wave Transit is looking at some different funding mechanisms outside of what we've talked about as well.
So I'm glad the folks out there who voted for the concert venue, the soccer park, all these other tens of millions of dollars that we've invested into, entertainment venues that, we'll bring people and money into the area, but at the cost of what? Because now, down the pipeline, we're actually going to be addressing needs rather than wants in our community.
And then the person that comes from Raleigh that comes to see a concert falls in love with Wilmington, and now I got to build them a house. So there you go. That's how that happens. No, we're going to continue to monitor these things. We're going to continue to push a lot of the land use criteria, particularly with the workforce housing. And just really housing in general. It's a need, and we've got to start getting out there in front of it and really pushing on it.
Cameron, thanks so much for the time, my man.
As always, thank you, Joe.
Cameron Moore with the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association joins us twice a month to talk issues surrounding the construction industry, both locally, regionally, and across the country. Great insight and perspective, as always, from the executive officer of the Wilmington Cape Fear Homebuilders Association.
Horrible news. Experts say we'll see larger numbers and different breeds of mosquitoes to wreak havoc on your backyard, making this year one of the worst.
Anopheles and Culex variety mosquito.
Experts also say there is only one defense against this onslaught. Call the Bugman from Bugno Pest Control.
That's Mr. Bugno to you, pal.
Bugno Pest Control's mosquito-killing formula keeps your yard bug-free. Call Bugno Pest Control, 910-367-2501, or visit bugnopestcontrol.com. Take back your yard.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina, practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
When the war between the states began, North Carolina answered the call for Southern independence. From the mountains to the ocean, North Carolinians volunteered to defend their state. They came from all walks of life. Some were farmers and craftsmen, others politicians and professional soldiers. The old North State would eventually send 125,000 of her sons into service, more than any other state in the Confederacy, and over 40,000 gave their lives for the cause. On August 11, 2001, the Confederate Veterans Memorial Forest on the Blue Ridge Parkway was rededicated. This beautiful 125-acre site is a living memorial to those men who fought for Southern independence and for their homes in North Carolina. This message has been brought to you by the North Carolina Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. To learn more, visit our website at www.ncscv.org.
Hey, this is Matt Ham, co-founder of Uprint Faith and Personal Development. Join myself and Kevin Adams every Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Wilmington's Big Talker for a fun, uplifting conversation about the upside of upside-down living.
I'm K.O. Davis from K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree, and I want to be your tree man.
When your trees need cut, 2 letters to know. One is a K, the other is an O. K.O.
Tree man. Tree man.
Proper trimming is the most important thing that you can do, so don't just hire anybody to do it. You need someone that knows what they're doing.
K.O.
Call the professionals at K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree and visit KOTrees.com.
O'Leary's Automotive Repair has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006. All right, as we wrap up this half hour, of course, great to be with you as we roll through our Freedom Friday broadcast to close out the week. Hopefully you've got some plans to enjoy yourself over the next few days. Get out and enjoy the weekend. It's like a beautiful morning along the coast if you're tuned in through our Facebook or YouTube channels. During the break, we bring you images from downtown Wilmington to Pleasure Island. Beach is starting to pack up here today. 910-299-7535 is our number if you'd like to call in. Of course, kind of an update locally. Start of the week, a very busy one with the county commissioners meeting. The contentious 6.5-hour New Hanover County School Board meeting, social emotional learning. Wow, I wish Sister Leonarda embraced social emotional learning in the 4th grade at Our Lady of Lourdes School in Milltown, New Jersey as I was a kid. I wonder how she would address social emotional learning. I would think it would have a ruler involved, maybe a bar of soap, the pantry at the convent across the way on the campus of Our Lady of Lourdes. Yeah, these are all things that I think would go into social emotional learning while I was growing up at Our Lady of Lourdes Middle School. Speaking of Our Lady of Lourdes School, yesterday or 2 days ago, I took Sophia out to lunch and, we went to Chick-fil-A because there's nothing better than some Christian chicken on a Thursday afternoon. Make it Wednesday. She loves some Chick-fil-A, and it's a rarity because we try and live the life that was carved out for us by our family members. And my mom and dad never, ever took us out to a fast food restaurant. It was like a holy day when we were able to eat, McDonald's. In fact, at Our Lady of Lourdes on the first Wednesday of every month, it was kind of a teacher work day, so you had a half day for students. And my mom would take us to McDonald's once a month on Wednesdays during our half day. And boy, oh boy, it was, like I said, a holy day, a magical day. And we try to, keep that, rarity in place with little Sophia, because you ask her what she wants for lunch, and every day, Chick-fil-A. I want Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A. Christian chicken. I tell her Christian chicken. She really loves it. So the other day, we took her to get some Christian chicken. She was happy as a kid could be. The little things in life, people. Because if you're following the news of the day, it gets a little frustrating at times. It maybe puts a little extra gray in your hair, like I've got some growing on the side of my Wop Mop right now. Can I say Wop Mop on the air? I guess I'm just describing myself, right? Because this week, of course, we were told by our fearless leader, our commander-in-chief, Joe Biden.
I keep forgetting I'm president.
Yeah, this week, Joe Biden, after he told the American people and the world that...
I keep forgetting I'm president.
Well, he then went on to tell our military servicemen and women that, no joke, global warming is the greatest threat facing America. Pandering, of course, as he's been in Europe the last few days, will participate in the G7 summit this week, and hopefully he's able to stay focused for just enough time to make sure that... the other leaders of foreign nations get the gist that he may be asleep at the wheel, because his wife pointed that out to him just the other day.
Joe, pay attention.
So when he was speaking to our servicemen and women, again, no joke, global warming, the greatest threat facing America, pandering, of course, to those across the pond in Europe, based on some of the decisions made by the previous administration to pull the country out of some of these ridiculous deals and accords in regards to climate change and the efforts being made around the world to limit our impact on the environment. Of course, we know here, day one of the Harris-Biden administration canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, among other initiatives that are working against our common interests as Americans to provide a cheap, affordable, abundant ways of energy and natural resources to consumers out there, and do it in an energy-independent way. Joe pandering, telling our servicemen and women of our great country who are stationed overseas that global warming is the greatest threat facing America. Of course, this came 2 weeks after he was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when he told Americans that white supremacy was the greatest threat facing our country. I can't keep up with all of this. And in fact, neither can Joe.
I get up in the morning and look at Jill and say, where the hell are we?
So this week it's climate change. Last week it was white supremacy. Can you say pandering? Let's be honest here. These folks could give two you-know-whats about you, me, and everyone else in our society. It's that simple. But he's a common, good, decent man. Say what, Joe?
The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas. Does anyone doubt this whole nation would be better off from the investments those people make? And I promise you, that's why I set up this National Small Business Administration that's much broader, because they're going to get those loans.
Joe, pay attention.
I love those barrettes in her hair, man. I tell you what, look at her. She looks like she's 19 years old, sitting there with her, like a little lady with her legs crossed. I get up in the morning and look at Jill and say, where the hell are we? I keep forgetting I'm president.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. World leaders from the Group of 7 industrialized nations are set to commit at their summit to share at least 1 billion coronavirus shots with struggling countries around the world. Half the doses coming from the U.S. and 100 million from the U.K. Vaccine sharing commitments from President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday set the stage for the G7 leaders meeting in England. Today, leaders will pivot from opening greetings and a family photo directly into a session on building back better from COVID-19. Closer to home, the state medical examiner's office report on the death of Andrew Brown Jr. confirms he was killed by a gunshot to the back of the head. The report lists Brown's cause of death as a homicide. The finding matches up with an independent report commissioned by Brown's family. However, the state's report and the independent report differ as to how many other gunshot wounds Brown suffered. The state's report saying Brown was shot just one other time in the arm. None of the deputies involved in Brown's death face criminal charges. 2 have since returned to work. 1 resigned. In Bladen County, the sheriff's office looking for 2 people accused of stealing lottery tickets. Warrants have been issued for 26-year-old Richard Williams and 21-year-old Doc McIver for felony larceny and conspiracy to commit larceny. The 2 were wanted for allegedly stealing lottery tickets from 2 convenience stores. If you know where they are, call the Bladen County Sheriff's Office. And state wildlife officials say there has been a rise in the number of snake, alligator, and bear sightings. North Carolina Wildlife says one of the reasons for that increase is that many of these wild animals who were born this spring are now starting to venture out. Bears have been spotted in downtown Wilmington and other residential areas, as have large alligators. Snake sightings are also becoming more common. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Friday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with the Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, today we are going to see more of the same. Warm and humid conditions stick around, and inland communities are going to jump back up into the upper 80s, low 90s this afternoon under partly to mostly sunny skies. And as we get into the second half of the day, we are going to have to watch out for scattered showers and even some isolated thunderstorms developing, but overall not expecting a washout this evening. Late tonight, though, a few showers stick around with temperatures falling into the low to middle 70s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by 2 Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to 2menandatruck.com. 2menandatruck.com.
I get up in the morning and look at Jill and say, where the hell are we? I keep forgetting I'm president.
Joe, pay attention.
I love those barrettes in her hair, man. I tell you what, I look at her, she looks like she's 19 years old, sitting there with her, like a little lady with her legs crossed. The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas. Does anyone doubt this whole nation would be better off from the investments those people make? And I promise you, that's why I set up this National Small Business Administration that's much broader, because they're going to get those loans.
Joe, pay attention.
You can whiz on my leg, but don't tell me it's raining.
It's a dumpster fire.
I get up in the morning and look at Jill and say, where the hell are we?
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside, the show's about to start.
Back onto the Big Top, the ring leader with you here this morning on the Big Talker FM, because this is a clown show and a circus in every sense of the word. We got a guy who keeps forgetting he's president of the United States. Ha ha ha. A little 14-year-old man, she looks like she's 19 with those barrettes in her hair. Man. Hey, if only blacks had accountants and lawyers, they'd be successful in our society. Joe, pay attention. God bless America. Yael Ossowski with us here on the Big Talker FM from the Consumer Choice Center. And, well, he's in Europe again, and so is Grandpa Joe. So, Yael, hey, you can have him. As far as I'm concerned, good morning to you, friend.
Yeah, good morning. We had great coffee this morning, me and Grandpa Joe.
Well,
Great time.
I'm sure he remembered it thoroughly in the conversations that you had lobbying him for ideals related to consumer choice, because based on the agenda that he seems to be pushing, not necessarily the most friendly to we, the consumers out there in this great society that we live in.
No, not at all. I think if we were actually to get a meeting on the books, it would probably last at least 75 days. And it would take a lot of action. Probably need some people to tag in for him. Our list would be very long, but I think would be pretty effective, Joe. Just really depends if the other Joe Biden would be as keen to hear our ideas.
Well, first you'd have to ask him if he could turn up the hearing aid so he can learn a little bit more about what consumer choice means and how friendly your principles and ideals are for everyday people out there trying to make a buck, put a little bit away, and enjoy the great benefits of living in this country and in other places around the world that you push consumer choice efforts. Let me ask you, as far as the lobbying that you do here in the States as compared to elsewhere, around the world, because you've got people all over the globe, if you could have an index as far as people that are most willing to listen and then push your sorts of, items of interest on the agenda, where do you resonate most?
Well, in terms of countries, that's an interesting question. I think there are a number of them, fairly innovative ones doing great things. There are different states in the U.S. that also do this, that have various policies that are quite interesting and that really make us excited, because that's what the laboratories of democracy were supposed to be about. We have a great state policy. For instance, when we look at cannabis legalization, I know we probably disagree on some of that, Joe, but that is something that we've been very passionate about and I think has had very good results. We see some states that have the low taxes, places like Florida and Texas. And even if we look at other countries, you look at a place like Estonia, incredibly low taxes, very friendly to companies, to innovators. And it is a place where over to Dubai. So they're over there in the Middle East because that country hasn't had the same restrictions that we've had in North America and in Europe. So a lot of people have been doing that. And then we look at Latin America, which is usually not a bastion for liberty. There's been a lot of revolutions, if many of your listeners remember that, over the course of the 80s and the 90s. But I would say that if you look at a place like El Salvador, it's been pretty interesting. The last couple of months, we've had the president of El Salvador. He's actually appeared on the Tucker Carlson show. He's trying to change the narrative about his small country, which is usually quite poor. But he actually made huge news headlines across the world. He actually proposed a bill, and it passed, to make the cryptocurrency Bitcoin legal tender, meaning that it is accepted as just like the government currency. The government currency there in El Salvador, fortunately or unfortunately, happens to be the U.S. dollar, which is awesome to see. This is a kind of great new innovative way to think about things. This is not the same thing as the Chinese, digital yuan or whatever they've been pushing there in the People's Republic of China. But I do think El Salvador adopting Bitcoin, while many of your listeners might not understand all the technicalities of it, all it means is that there's a country that's willing to embrace innovation and change. And something like Bitcoin that is immutable, that no one can control, that is really based upon the value that we put into it, into the algorithms that have been conceived. I think that's a beautiful thing. It's something that I've been talking about really since 2014. I wrote an article back then making the case that Latin American countries, specifically those that have USD or are tied to the US dollar, that they should adopt Bitcoin as their currency, because it's something that will not be inflated like crazy. That is immutable, that is not centralized. It's something that is on the decentralized blockchain, and you could actually create an entirely new industry of great companies from that. So it is 2021, I guess the first time that a country takes that advice, but really happy to see. So I think El Salvador is a very interesting place. Again, there are many other countries that are doing great things. I'm still very hopeful and still very bullish on the United States. I think we have great institutions that do foster great ideas, So don't worry, Joe. I'm not giving up on the fair U.S. of A. just yet.
Well, with that said, as you kind of highlighted early, and talking about how these the 50 different states are meant to be kind of 50 different experiments, trying out this, that, and the other, see what works, see what doesn't, and then maybe other states adopt similar practices or adjust things in a way that stray from efforts that did not turn out the way that maybe individual state had planned. But it seems as if here in our country at this point, there's a big effort, particularly by those on the left and within this current administration, to kind of centralize more of everything, which ultimately takes away from this novel thought of federalism, states' rights, and the ability to try different things when you're basically just laying out the carpet as kind of a one-size-fits-all approach that we continue to hear, coming out of Washington, more of a nationalization rather than a localization, which we all believe, of course, leads to the betterment of conditions for Americans and, the global population as a whole when things are based and decided locally rather than from one centralized place.
Yeah, and it's something that I talk about obviously when it comes to the private sector and the market where you have a lot of competition. But it's also important to have that with rulemaking and particularly jurisdictions. And if you have better rules in North Carolina, then you have a lot of people from South Carolina. I know when I was young, to buy fireworks, we had to go to South Carolina. If people wanted to buy, alcohol on Sundays, well, you got to go to some other state because it ain't going to happen in North Carolina. So it's this kind of stuff to where you want the better system and the better rules to win out. And you are correct. There's been so much centralization, and it has been bipartisan. And we don't really admit it. Spending under Trump's reign was going through the roof as well. It has been on a very upward trajectory now for probably the last 2 decades. And the centralization of the rules, we don't really recognize it until we're faced with a situation where we have to comply. And, it's no mistake that the big 4 accounting companies, the PwC, the Deloittes, they are billion-dollar companies because they, provide expertise on regulatory compliance. So the more rules that we have, the more lawyers that we need, and the more that things are decided by just a few people. And I think that does provide us with worse outcomes and less choice. And look, let's face it, there's a reason people are moving to Florida to start their tech companies. California hasn't been too good. There's a reason that Elon Musk and many of his other entrepreneurs are moving to Texas. And it's this kind of spirit and energy that we should carry forth. I'll give you an example of where this is not working. Joe Biden at the G7, he's over here in Europe. They're excited because they just passed this global minimum corporate tax idea, meaning that every single country in the world, if they want to be in the cool club, needs to pass at least a 15% corporate income tax, which is frankly ridiculous to do that on a global scale. But it also means that countries like Ireland, like Estonia, many of these countries will lose their advantage. And it means that you're not going to have as much competition that's going to be out there, and people are going to have more of an incentive to stay, and it won't be able to invest as much. It's just another example to where we think centralizing things will make it better. But realistically, we have to have more faith in people and in individuals, because I know a lot of your audience, they can make decisions themselves. They don't need to have it done by a centralized entity emanating either from DC or some very strange place in Brussels in the EU. So I think that's the spirit that we have to go back to. And it's not just with products, it's politics and rules as well.
Isn't this kind of the greater debate that we're having as a whole in our society, from the local school district through international commerce, as you just kind of laid out there, is that, there is a group of people, there are a group of people, whether it be in big government or all around the world, that believe they are smarter, they have, they are ahead of the curve and feel that if only we give them a little bit more influence, power, maybe some more of our money, that they will make better decisions, which will create better outcomes for us. Again, from the local school district to international way of thought, as far as the way the world works, through commerce and business, this train of thought is kind of trickling through every aspect of our life at this point.
Yeah, and I think particularly if we look at the local level, the schooling is a big deal, because it really didn't matter in the state of North Carolina if there were no cases in your county or in your area or very little, or even if you had very high vaccination rates. you were still subject to the same closures when it came to the schools. You're still subject to the same restrictions on your businesses. And it's that kind of thing to where I know that we're at an interesting cross point. I know we were in a pandemic. I know there was a lot of authority that was ceded to governors around the country. I know that in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, the state legislatures were very fired up about that and were able to push back or win lawsuits. And I do think that was a good thing to do. But, we have to be wary about the centralization of some of this. And it's not, again, just a lot of Democrats that are doing this. Here's an example that I think prompts a lot of interesting discussion. There's a lot of talk about critical race theory. We can go into that for hours, Joe, but I know there are some schools that are teaching this or have this in their curriculum. Personally, I don't think it's the best of things to implement into our kind of school curricula. But the efforts to completely ban a particular style of thinking or a way of teaching, again, I'm very hesitant to do that. I think really the best way that we can win the battle of ideas is having the better ideas. And if we don't understand the ideas, whether they're crazy, much like part of the critical race theory literature indicates or not, we still have to be able to understand it. And, we have to face the fact that this is now a part of the elite conversation. And if people don't have the tools to understand it, they don't have the tools to combat it. So I'm very skeptical of these kind of laws or bills where they're trying to ban things on critical race theory in schools. I would hope that these are, decisions that are made by local school districts and that local school boards will hold them accountable. And if they don't want it there, that's great. I don't think a state mandate or even a federal mandate is a good idea. And I know that won't put me on the good side of conservatives this morning on the radio, but I still think it's an important principle to carry forth.
Well, you're definitely in the doghouse in my world because I feel that, frankly, it's just garbage to be told that, based on my skin color, I'm inherently an oppressor as compared to my neighbor and my friend who argues that, because of their skin color, they're inherently oppressed. I mean, right there, that's the end of the argument for me. Again, as far as what the government has to say about it, I'm just not, again, really privy to whether or not we should be mandating this, that, or the other. I just know the basis of that argument is just completely ridiculous, and to introduce it into our elementary schools is, a sin and one that we'll have to live with for a long, long time. But that's just my point of view, and you have yours, and that is a great thing about America.
Let's carry this forth. I agree with you, and I do think on the whole, and I've read all the books and read all the articles, and I also think it is a terrible way. It is a neo-racism. There's a new book coming out by John McWhorter, who's a professor at Columbia University that discusses just that. So I do think overall it is a terrible theory. It does go back to a lot of the Marxist principles that we had for a long time. But I think that banning, using the force of government or law to say that it should not appear in X or Y space is somewhat dangerous, because if let's say the shoe is turned the other way and Democrats now have the authority in all the local school districts, who's to say they won't have their own banning of a proper teaching of the American Revolution or a proper teaching of the Industrial Revolution or anything like that? And I think that's where the second that we put our kids in educational districts, anytime we do any laws to try to teach history and use a mandate, I think that's bad.
Well, and on that note, a lot of the same people pushing these types of theories are also the ones that are wholeheartedly opposed allowing me to utilize the taxpayer money allocated for my kid to go seek additional options if I feel that that school is going in the wrong direction, right? These same people are telling us that we have to send our kids to this school and we have to teach our kids this or that. I think that's where a lot of people, there's a lot of friction created with that, given that there's a lack of choice out there, and that if we're going to go down this road of installing these sorts of theories and curriculum into our everyday studies when we've got 30% proficiency in reading, math, and science, that maybe we're going down a road and a rabbit hole that creates a very slippery slope.
Well, that's our point of agreement, Joe. It's all about school choice. If you don't like what's being taught in the public schools, there are other avenues. There are other educational centers where you can send your children. Thank the Lord for that, because otherwise, you are right. It'd be very, very difficult to compete to make sure we have a good curriculum.
And what I like about you, though, is you're consistent in your thought. And to bring us to another topic, in that there are people in Washington who want to try and break up the big tech companies. And there is another point of disagreement we have as far as the influence and the sorts of things that go on within big tech and how we as a society have failed to embrace it in a way that turns into a positive thing. And there are a lot of positives. Look, we're communicating around the world right now without any sort of glitch or break in the system. I think as a society, we've handled it terribly, particularly for our kids. And then our government tells us we need to limit our kids' screen time. And the first time we run into some type of hurdle, we then put our kids in front of a screen for an extended period of time. So with that said, it's your belief, as many out there, that there are many in Washington who are trying to break up these tech companies, and you feel that this should not be the approach that we're taking in Washington as far as restricting the ability for private companies to operate the way they choose.
Yeah, no, it's much the same. It's not Microsoft or Facebook who can throw me into a jail cell. It's the government. And I think that difference between public and private is really important in terms of the reason that many sides want to do this. For the left, they just don't like big companies. They don't like capitalism in general. They surely do not like maybe the role of social media in propelling Donald Trump in 2016. For those on the right, for conservatives, it is a lot about bias and moderation. And I think these problems definitely exist. There are various instances where it's happened. But the problem with using law to try to change that or shape that or break the companies up is that you create unintended consequences that are almost worse. The bill in Florida by our buddy Ron DeSantis that we talked about, who's the governor, he has a bill that's saying, platforms like Twitter and Facebook cannot ban political candidates from platforms. Well, Rebecca Jones, if you remember, she created her own COVID dashboard. She was eventually arrested. There might be some fraud involved. We don't have the whole story. She became a darling of sort of the COVID crowd. She's actually filed to run against Matt Gaetz. So technically, according to the rules and the laws in Florida, she now needs to have her Twitter account reinstated after she was suspended. And it's that kind of stuff that you're doing is all the tools that you're proposing. Just imagine the most detestable political character and imagine them having the same power. That's why our focus should be on reducing the influence of government institutions and not increasing them. And for antitrust and for breaking up companies, it's much the same. We as consumers are the ones that are going to be harmed. And I think a lot of conservatives need to hear that message because, yes, it'd be great to take a huge swipe at Facebook and Twitter. Maybe you don't like their CEO or their teams. But again, if you would do this, it would create a very bad precedent that the other side would be even more willing to use come the next administration or the next time they have full control of Congress, the courts, and everything else.
And like everything else, you give some of these big companies the ability to craft and work with lawmakers to push forward initiatives here, there, and everywhere. Well, it turns into what we see in a lot of big businesses and corporations. In fact, they just cook the books for themselves, and it makes it a lot harder for the little guy to compete day to day with these global giants.
Oh, yeah. And I think the example of the coronavirus pandemic and what you were allowed to say and not say on social media, everything that we've learned has changed our minds on basically everything. And everything they said in the beginning about the lab leak hypothesis, all that stuff was banned on social media. So I think we should definitely call these companies out for bad moderation. They did a terrible job. And, there are alternatives and people can use them. I like to use Mastodon instead of Twitter, or I like to use, sort of my own social networks that I've built. And I have that choice. But again, that doesn't mean that we should use the government to intervene. Again, these companies made mistakes. They will continue to make mistakes. And any time that they do anything with government is something where we need to be skeptical. And particularly with everything related to COVID, that's definitely taught us that. I can tell you a million other stories, Joe, of things that are banned or not allowed on social media, or even our own Consumer Choice Center Facebook page has been, put in the penalty box for a while for pretty normal ads. And I oppose all that stuff. But again, the more that we can continue to debate this stuff, get it out into the ether, and hold these guys accountable, I think the better. I just don't think breaking them up, using the force of government, I think that's liable to explode in our face.
Yael Ossowski with the Consumer Choice Center with us here this morning. Yael, before I let you go, as we started the segment off, we know that the Commander-in-Chief, sleepless Joe at the wheel is in Europe this week at the UK, attending the G7 summit. We saw Dr. Jill, of course, stack full of notes on her desk. She was preparing, not sure what Grandpa Joe was doing, probably getting a nap. With that said, when we look at Europe and the U.S. and future relations and why we as Americans should care, from your perspective in Vienna, Austria, in Europe here this morning, why should we here in Wilmington, North Carolina, give two craps about what's going on the other side of the pond here this morning with Grandpa Joe and the G7?
Yeah, I know. There's not much to care about if you're talking about Belgium or France or anything else. It just has to say, what is the U.S. foreign policy and what is our goal? And right now it seems a bit muddied in the Biden administration. And if we're not paying attention to what's happening in China, if we're not paying attention to what's happening in Southeast Asia, there is a rise of totalitarian governments that exists. Liberal democracies have to stick together. I think Biden came to Europe more thinking about domestic issues, is not really thinking about the broader picture. But that's something that really has to be top of mind, because if we get into a larger battle, economic, political, or otherwise, it's going to help to have these other allies stand up. And unfortunately, China is investing a lot of money in Europe, a lot of money in Africa. We need to present American money, American ideas, and hopefully have a better alliance, because I don't like what's coming out of the Chinese Communist Party, whether it be a virus or terrible policies. But I do think we got to be vigilant.
Yael Ossowski with the Consumer Choice Center with us here this morning, host of the Consumer Choice Radio Show. Their weekly program airs tomorrow at 10 o'clock. You can find out more about what we discussed and further on their website at consumerchoicecenter.org. Yael, look at that, the American way. We can agree, we can disagree, and we can still have a beer and be friends afterwards. Who would have thunk it? It's a novel way of life that we're living here this morning, Yael. What great examples we are.
Yes, sir. I put my sword down to discuss with you, so I love it.
Yael, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, we're wrapping up the broadcast here this morning as we part ways with you here at 10 o'clock, as we always do. Great Freedom Friday broadcast. Hope you enjoyed the insight. A lot of conversations this week, locally, statewide, nationally, globally, to round out the broadcast here this morning with our friend Yael. Ray Ostein next week. We'll talk with Steve Barger, Brunswick County school member, going to lend some insight into his thoughts surrounding critical race theory, social emotional learning. I can imagine Sister Leonarda back in 4th grade at Our Lady of Lourdes, what her take would be on social emotional learning back in, the early 90s. If only I was still in contact with Sister Leonarda. Poof. We'll talk to you Monday.
Keeping Bald Head Island informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WF.